Good afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started for today. Happy February 2nd, 2022 or 2/2/2022. Kind of a fun little date. So we are moving right along with week number 5. I know we've got a lot of folks here on Zoom today, so welcome. Glad to have you here. So for today, we're going to be picking up where we left off last class, talking about the way that groups work together to solve problems, including the ways that we use things such as brainstorming and thinking through ideas to deal with a variety of different complex issues and challenges that can impact us every day. So to get us started, I want to do just a quick recap. Last class, we talked about the small group assessment. That is your next written assignment for the course that's due on February 13th. I'll just give you a couple of reminders related to the expectations there. We also went over the idea of decision making. When we participate in a group, whether it's as simple as a group of friends that's deciding what to do or where to travel over the weekend, to something like a more formal group of people that's deciding who to hire for a job, right? That decision making is something we have to deal with as part of a group, given that a group is created and maintained for a specific purpose or goal. And then we talked about some of the different ways that people can come to or reach a decision, including something like a consensus, right, where everybody is on the same page, a plot, and a couple other methods. As a reminder, and a note for folks that are here for the first time this week today, the small group assessment assignment was one that we went over and discussed in class on Monday. Like with the previous writing assignment in the course, the prompt is available for you to access on Canvas, along with the rubric. For this assignment, again, I'm asking you to think about some of the in-class activities that we've been doing throughout the quarter. For instance, on the first day of class, getting to know each other and finding similarities. The activity where Luis is the member of the hiking group and is trying to find ways to participate and be a member of the group. The survival activity, where we were trying to find some of the ways that you could rank items if you were lost in the wilderness and needed to do things to survive. The pre-listening activity, where I was asking you to create a good environment for people to come in who are interviewing for a job, as well as the activity where you all were part of a small business and trying to put together an inclusive and supportive environment for people from different cultures. We'll be doing another activity today too that you could use or apply to this assignment as well. So if you have a lot to draw from, including if you have not been able to attend every class, you can draw from the group activities that you have been able to be a part of for this assignment too. So again, you can access that on Canvas. Like last time, I'm happy to look over rough drafts, outlines, or you can meet with me in office hours to discuss that further. So just know that that's coming up. Again, it's not a very long assignment, but it's a chance for you to apply and use some of the skills that we've been talking about as far as being a part of a group, sharing ideas, and contributing. Also, I just wanted to give you a reminder with regard to the previous assignment, where you are reflecting on your participation in a group you are or have been a part of in the past. I do have a number of folks that have not turned in that assignment yet. Remember that if you turn that in by the end of the day today and let me know that you're using your get out of jail free card, you can turn that in with no grade penalty, but today would be the last day to use that card without any sort of grade deduction. If you don't use the card, remember it's minus 5% for each day it's late, so it'd be minus 35% for today. So anticipate getting the remaining ones in today. That way I can get feedback to you on that assignment by the end of the day on Friday, and that feedback will directly help you to prepare and think about what to do for this assignment. So I recommend using that feedback on the reflection once you receive it to help you with completing and working through your next writing assignment for the course. So last class, we talked about 7 steps of problem solving in groups. We talked about the idea, again, that groups are faced with challenges or problems to deal with, and that there's a lot of different ways they could go about addressing this. Last class, we used the example of the philosophy club, putting on a symposium and hosting an event where people come to talk about and deal with philosophy-related issues, and about how the group needs to work together to figure out the problems and particularly to establish criteria. What does it mean for a group to successfully resolve or deal with the issue? That's an important consideration as part of that 7-step process. So again, we're solving problems and working together on these all the time. We also talked last class about the different methods that groups can work together in to reach solutions, right? Plot being the idea that you kick the can down the road, you don't actually reach a solution, maybe you decide to sleep on it or give yourself more time to figure things out. Delegate to an expert, average, or compromise, meeting in the middle. Voting, right, where you don't necessarily do a majority vote, could also be a 2/3 vote. This is used in a lot of formal settings in which there needs to be a larger mass of support than just 50% plus one. And also a plurality, right? A plurality is not necessarily the majority, but there's multiple options to choose from. Say it's like 40% compared to the other options, then that could also be a way to vote. And again, we talked about consensus being the idea that not necessarily everybody agrees, right, or really believes in the option, but is willing to sign on to it. We talked about the idea of groupthink shaping a lot of the ways that we reach consensus. That is, not everybody wants to do the symposium as a hybrid, but says, you know what, everybody else is supporting it. I really wanted to do it as just a face-to-face thing, but I guess I'll jump aboard and support this. So we talked about some of those methods of reaching a solution. So for this class, I want to talk about power, and I want to talk about the ways in which power and its sort of levels on a spectrum impact the way the groups reach decisions. We are going to talk about creativity and the brainstorming process. And also, again, a scenario where I'm asking you to apply some of those skills in brainstorming as we think about planning a birthday party. So one thing that I previewed last class that I wanted to get into more detail for today is the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum, right? This is a model that helps us think about some of the different ways that group members arrive at and reach decisions. To give you an example, let's say you're part of a competitive club or something like an athletic team or extracurricular, right? It's a good chance you go out and go to competitions where you are competing against people from other schools. It's also a good chance as part of that group that there's ethical guidelines about how you participate as a member of that group. For instance, it would probably not be ethical or a good approach if you, as a member of Eastern Oregon University's team, decided to actively coach and help out a team from a rival school that you compete against on a regular basis, right? If it was found that you were helping out another school and supporting your opponents, there's a good chance that your own team and your own coach would be pretty upset and not be happy that you violated the agreement that you formed with that group, right? So if that happens, if you have a member of your team who has decided to go rogue and to support the opposing team, right? There are a few different ways that your group could handle that. So one is a fully autocratic. Think about autocratic as kind of like a dictatorship or monarchy, right? Where the group leader gets to call the shots and make the rules. Under a fully autocratic system, a manager or team leader makes the decision and just announces it to the group, right? It has been decided that this teammate has been kicked out of the group. Oftentimes, under this system, there isn't even much of an explanation or discussion about why that person got kicked out, or even space to create a discussion, such as opening it up for questions, right? Oftentimes, a team manager or group leader is going to be the type of person who does this fully autocratic form if they're not comfortable with, or they don't want the group to discuss or negotiate or have input on the process, right? Sometimes when it comes to like issues that might be sensitive, private, the group manager can't disclose. They just have to announce something, right? If there's a particularly personal sensitive issue or emergency that causes somebody to no longer be a part of the group member might say, I'm sorry, but so-and-so can't attend, right? And out of respect for that person's privacy, would not elaborate beyond. So fully autocratic, right, is one way to do it. It's useful if the leader has to make a call and has to be very strong and specific in a situation. But the downside, right, is if your leader or coach is the type of person who just announces a decision, it can feel frustrating to not be included or feel like you have a role of making decisions at all, right? You can feel frustrated if you don't have input on decisions that impact you. Another idea here, less autocratic, is that the manager or group leader is still making the call, but they're selling it. They're trying to justify or explain why it's a good idea. So you get that elaboration or detail. For instance, I've decided to remove this person from our team because they actively have coached and supported an opposing team. I think that it's a good idea to remove this person from the team because they go against our standards, codes of conduct, and have shown themselves to not be trustworthy by supporting teams from other schools, right? So in that situation, you are given the rationale, and a group leader might do that to show and to justify their decision, which is useful, but can also invite things like disagreement or frustration that group members were consulted or included as part of that. Manager could present ideas and offer questions. So this is a little bit less autocratic and a little bit more democratic, right? That the leader says, you know what, this person has been supporting another school, they've been violating our agreement with the team. I think we should consider suspending them for 3 months. Do you think this is a good idea? What are your thoughts, right? They're still getting the idea, they're still steering the ship, but they are opening it up for people to participate and offer their input in a way that contributes to the overall discussion. More democratic, right? And democratic in this case being the idea that people have more say and more input, including a group leader, would say that a manager would present tentative decisions or ideas that could be changed. So for instance, manager says, hey, I'm thinking that we should give this person a 3-month suspension. Let's talk about this. Does this make sense? Are there options that we can do that are a little bit different? So it still lets the leader have that role of putting the idea out there, but shows some level of openness and flexibility. Get more democratic. If we get more democratic, right, we suggest a problem and then open up opportunities for solutions, right? In this form, a manager or leader is not saying the specific course of action to be taken or the direction, but is instead letting the group reach that solution together. In this way, a group leader or manager has power in setting the stage and choosing what issues to talk about. For instance, we have a member of the team that is actively supported and coached an opposing school. This is a problem. Let's talk about some of the ways that we could approach or deal with the problem. And you can have group members who decide that yes, this person should be suspended. It's a good method of keeping people engaged and participating and helping them feel involved. But if you as a group leader need and are married to a specific outcome, right, then that could be an issue for you. If you want this person removed from the team for their action, a more democratic form doesn't really make a lot of sense. A manager defines the limits and asks the group to make a decision. So for instance, they might say, there's this issue. I want you all to develop a solution for this person that has coached another team. And I want you to think about what we should do. We can't do nothing, right? And we can't expel them from the school. Can't do either of those extremes. So within reason, what is an option that works best, right? And then lastly, is a manager who basically lets members of the group just participate and make the decision that they feel is best within whatever limits or boundaries they have, right? So rather than asking the group to make the decision, they're saying, group members, you can deal with this. In other words, you could decide to do nothing, but it's up to you in terms of how you want to handle for the rest of us, rather than demanding them to reach a solution, right? So this continuum is useful when we think about the groups we're a part of, whether they're friend groups in a more kind of corporate or professional context, or our clubs and organizations, right? Because it helps us to think about how we behave and how we choose to delegate work to people in our group. Obviously, there's settings and contexts where sometimes it's more or less appropriate to do so. Another core idea that I want to get at for today is this idea of by association. And this is something that we'll be talking about a little bit more when we do our activity today. But it's the idea that one huge benefit that we get from working together in groups and from getting to know each other in a group context, right, is that we allow each other to form connections and ideas that we would not be able to form if we were just working alone. That is kind of like putting together various links in a chain, right? You're able to connect ideas and merge thoughts in a way that is especially unique. You're putting together a philosophy symposium. You decide, hey, well, maybe we'll play some music in the background. Maybe we'll have like a philosophical debate projected on the screen and playing in the background. Maybe we'll bring in little philosophy-themed lanyards for everybody when they walk in. Maybe for folks on Zoom, we'll do a raffle for a gift card or something like that, right? You start having these ideas that start to connect and synergize with one another. And by participating in a group, you've created an opportunity for those ideas to connect in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So I kind of like this comic as a description of the idea of status quo. So in this comic, right, there's two people. One of them is just digging with a spoon, right? The other person says, hey, would you like a shovel? And they say, no, I'm already using the spoon. That's a way of thinking about the status quo. That yes, the shovel would be a much better way to dig the hole. It'd be faster, it'd be more efficient, it would use less energy. But he's reluctant to switch over to the shovel because it's different than what he's been doing, even if what he's been doing is not the best approach. How many folks are familiar in science with the idea of inertia? Like maybe a couple of you a little bit, right? Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, right? That's the reason that oftentimes if you like suddenly brake when you're driving, right? Your stuff that you have in the back seat, like your bag of groceries, just suddenly spills out forward, right? Is that sudden change? So inertia is a good way of thinking about how group members behave and interact with each other. That is, if things are going well, as they are in the status quo, where things are just the same, there's less of a desire to change or alter how a group member behaves or acts. Here's one way of thinking about it. If you're in a group that is working for a restaurant, right? So if you're part of restaurant staff and your restaurant has a menu, right? And you come in and you say, hey, I think we should change the menu. Your manager and the owner and other employees are probably going to push back and be like, why do we need to change the menu? What's the point? We're getting good sales. We have a good amount of interest, right? People like our restaurant. Why would we change the menu? All that can do is make people frustrated or angry at us that we got rid of their favorite food, right? In fact, we've seen that, right, with a lot of restaurants and chains like Taco Bell that get rid of stuff like, they're like breakfast stuff, right? That's frustrating when we see a change from the status quo. So, given that, right, it's important for us if we're changing or proposing an idea that alters the way it behaves to think carefully about the justification for that change. We're more likely to accept a change if we acknowledge that there is a problem or harm that's happening currently. We take a class in rhetoric, such as argumentative writing, which is really good exploration of these ideas. We talk a little bit about this idea of the burden of proof. That is, if you were proposing a change or alteration to the status quo, you're trying to change the menu, add a new item, or do something like that, right? You have to justify that change, explain why we should change the menu. Maybe, right, sales are going down, our restaurant is not very popular, changing up the menu will get more people interested in eating at our place. So changes are an important thing to justify, especially when you're behaving and acting in groups. And it's important for us to think about how oftentimes we're predisposed to not want to change. There is a book It was really popular in a lot of kind of corporate management, marketing, and applied situations you might have heard of, called Who Moved My Cheese? And the premise is kind of silly, but the conclusion is kind of interesting. So in this book, right, the book is a story of 2 humans and 2 rats that are trapped in this giant maze, right? And at one point in the maze is this giant block of cheese. And the idea being that the humans and the rats obviously are going to try to get through the maze and find the cheese. What happens over time, of course, is the cheese is in the exact same spot. And so the humans and the rats go the exact same way. They do the same, they take the left here, the right here, they go down the hall, and they get the cheese the same way every time. But when the location of the cheese suddenly moves one day, right, all of a sudden it's chaos. The humans are frustrated and upset. They go to the exact same place and the cheese is not there. And they're like, what do I do? But the rats are the ones that adapt and say, okay, I'm going to sniff. I'm going to try to find it. Okay, the cheese is over here now. And I'm going to go this different route in order to get it. And basically, this whole book and story is about adaptability. The idea that in order for us to work well as a group, we have to adapt to different circumstances, right? We have to go a different route through the maze because the cheese is in a different place. And if we go to the exact same place over and over, it's not going to work anymore. One way of thinking about this is in the context of COVID-19, right? We've seen a lot of businesses and companies and organizations that have gone under for a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones being an inability or failure to adapt. It's been sad, to see a lot of places like, a lot of our favorite restaurants and things that may have gone under COVID. But it's also true, there are a lot of organizations and groups that have adapted in terms of shifting to takeout or offering other opportunities for people to work and allow that group to function. So adaptability is a really important approach in thinking about group communication. A neophile is a kind of person that really enjoys adapting and changing circumstances, right? Having a lot of adaptability can be a good thing, but it also has a downside. If you're constantly reinventing the wheel or changing or altering the way that your group behaves, it's hard to stick to or land on an idea, right? It's one thing to be open to change and to create a new restaurant menu, but if your restaurant menu changes every 2 weeks, people are going to get upset. It's going to cost a ton of money, and people are not going to feel like there is stable access to food that you can get at the restaurant, right? So having some level of stability is an important thing to balance with having new ideas. Versus, right, a neophobe who would oppose new ideas and say, this is new, this is not what we've been doing, no, right? The inability to pair saying no to something with an alternative or an option or justification is a challenge, right? If people just say no, just because something's different, it's not really a very good argument or explanation. We've talked a little bit about culture, the way culture can impact how groups behave. One element of culture is an appeal to tradition, the idea that members of a culture are motivated to participate in what they've been doing in the past, right? That we've done it this way in the past motivates the way the group members behave now. We've always gone to this restaurant for Christmas, right? Is an example of how things in the past might implicate present. So an important idea here then is thinking about what brainstorming means and how it works. There's an example in the book that I thought was kind of fun and interesting, and that is this kind of continuum that runs between brooders to spawners. So the example that they use is an ostrich, right? An ostrich lays these massive, massive eggs. They don't have very many of the eggs, right? But they really meticulously, incubate them and ensure that the eggs are safe and really pay attention to those specific eggs. Another example are elephants, right? Elephants are mammals, they give birth to live young. And elephants actually have like a really long pregnancy and gestation period. It takes quite a long time, I forget how many months, I think it's like 18 months, for there to be a baby elephant that comes out, right? And in those situations, right, those types of creatures are really concerned with the small amount of young that they have. Sea urchins, kind of the opposite. It's kind of weird, maybe a little gross, but like sea urchins apparently spread over 1 million eggs, and the vast majority of those eggs get eaten or die or otherwise don't make it. But there's a very small amount of eggs that actually do survive and create more sea urchins, right? So probably more than you ever wanted to know about how sea urchins reproduce. But this example, I think, is useful when we're thinking about brainstorming, that there is a collection of people that are more like ostriches, that they have a couple of ideas or a few things that are important to them that they want to pose to the group, like maybe an idea or a proposal that they've been really sitting on and spending a lot of time working on. I think we should add this to the menu. And I've been thinking about the recipe and playing with the recipe the whole time. Or, right, people that are more like spawners, where they have a ton of different options. We could add onion rings, we could add jalapeno poppers, we could add mozzarella sticks, we could add this, and this, right? And instead, show us a ton of different ideas all at once. Brainstorming tends to follow into the latter category. In fact, oftentimes good brainstorming means that a lot of your ideas are not going to be very good. And that's part of the point, that's part of the process. If you've ever done brainstorming on your own, maybe you're a composer, right? And you're creating music, or you're drawing art, or you're working, on some sort of creative venture, like a story, right? There's a good chance that brainstorming process has produced some real duds, some things that just did not work out for you. But that's okay, because as you're working on it, that you can do a lot of trial and error, that you can continue to think through and brainstorm ideas. However, right, when we find ourselves in a group, that dynamic looks really different. When we're in a group, we're a lot more anxious about things like social judgment, by what other people will think or how they'll feel about our ideas, right? So brainstorming, this idea of generating as many possible ideas as you can, something we hear talked about a lot in different classes, we don't really look at or think about, can be great because we're creating new ideas and new opportunities, but it can also pose a challenge to how we behave in groups, because when we brainstorm, we're a lot more concerned about what other people think, if they'll shoot down our ideas, if we have good ideas to share, right? We're putting our ideas and thoughts out there, and that fear of judgment or acceptance is definitely going to implicate our participation. Give you one example that I think is kind of cool about the brainstorming process, right? When I was younger, I watched a lot of Pixar films, and I would imagine you've probably seen at least a couple yourself. Movies like Toy Story, WALL-E, Up, Finding Nemo, all those, right? And one of the things I always find really cool about Pixar is that they have, I feel like, some of the most creative ideas. What if there's a world where there's monsters, right? And they go through doors to scare kids so they can get energy to power their cities. Like, those ideas are really cool and interesting. It's a really cool premise and a lot of world building. And they consistently produce these interesting films and premises. So I actually found through a book, Pixar described the creative process. How did they make all these cool ideas for movies over time? And one thing that I found really interesting, right, is that they mentioned that Pixar's approach is not that the director, producer, and those folks are the only ones who make a decision, but instead, every single person, like 200 to 250 people in a production company, shares ideas. And you could probably imagine that there are probably thousands upon thousands of ideas that come out there because of that brainstorming process, and because brainstorming is open. That creativity happens at that stage, right? And then, as far as group membership goes, right, what the leaders or producers of groups do is sort through, sift through the ideas, find the ones that fit into a coherent whole or support the story. So it's interesting to think back to group leadership and leadership styles, because it helps us understand how different members of the group can organize and put together those thoughts and translate brainstorming into solving the problem, in this case, making the ship. I like the idea of comparing it to an archaeological dig, where there's so much content to brainstorm and to think through, so that you're trying to find the diamond in the dig, right? So I think it's a good way of thinking about, and a good example of how brainstorming, just the sheer number of ideas, can be really important and also can translate into a very specific product or outcome that helps support the goal. There are also some considerations and what are known as weakening factors in brainstorming that I mentioned before, right? Brainstorming and working together in a group can be great, but there are some unique challenges that come. One thing we've talked about in the class is that when we're participating in a small group, oftentimes small group communication means that people are not as easily able to speak, right? There's a lot more people talking. Oftentimes only one person is talking at a time. You don't get as much of a word in edgewise or an ability to participate. What that can mean when it comes to brainstorming is that because other people are speaking, you're less willing to share your own ideas or thoughts or contributions to the group. So blocking is a really big concern here, right? That you might find that maybe a group leader or group member is shooting down ideas left and right. I don't like this idea. I don't like this idea. I don't like this idea. So you self-censor and choose not to share your own ideas or thoughts out of that concern. Or maybe you just don't have the time to share all of your ideas to the group. In any case, the presence of a lot more people that could be talking or participating relative to you can definitely raise an issue of how group members work together. Social matching is another concern, right? Think about how contagious a yawn is. You see somebody else yawning, you're going to yawn too. So it even happens with my dog, right? Social matching is kind of similar to that idea. It's the idea that we see people that are maybe low energy, that are unfocused, that are on our phone, and we use that as permission or justification to similarly not engage or participate. So social matching is definitely a major concern there. And then lastly is the illusion of group productivity, which is especially present in the brainstorming stage, where people are putting together ideas or thoughts, and oftentimes we overassume the amount that a group is actually able to get done, that we think the groups are more productive than they are based on what we find interesting or what stands out to us as the group members work together. So these are important considerations, right? That even though group members working together can brainstorm some great stuff, those limitations can definitely impact the process too. So here's what I want to do now. Using some of the things that we've talked about, I'm actually going to have two larger groups. I'm going to have everybody who's here face-to-face. We'll have a larger group of 8, and then we'll have everybody on Zoom in a group. So what your team is going to do is prepare for a birthday party. So Madeline has her 5th birthday in 2 weeks. I'm excited. She's currently living in LeGrand. Madeline's parents have tasked you and your group with helping to plan for a birthday party. You know that Madeline is a big fan of reading, basketball, and Disney films. What I want your group to do is to take around 10 minutes or so to brainstorm and come up with as many ideas as possible on how to host this party. At this stage, I don't want you to worry about whether or not your ideas are good. I just want you to brainstorm, really think through some options. You also do not need to write these down for attendance, so you're welcome to take notes and track those ideas through. And then once your group has shared its ideas and feels good about those ideas, I want your group to work together to arrive at a decision on how you're going to host Madeline's party and share that with everybody in the class. So again, I want you to focus on that brainstorming process, and coming up with ideas and options on how to do this party, and then be prepared to share how you've decided to host the party. So again, I'm going to have the 8 folks here all work together in a large group. And then I'm going to have folks on Zoom also work together in a group. And I'll create a breakout room for you all. So go ahead and get started. Start talking and thinking about what this birthday party might look like.
So having 3 different topics for like a birthday party is like pretty insane. So
you gotta look why Kareem's working.
you're adding like basketball team to like one party. Usually you would just pick one thing to go with that, but you could do it in sections.
Yeah. 5-year-old girls. What do they like? Everything girls? She likes reading and whatnot. And Disney, so we can combine the two, I guess.
Yeah.
Could be like a Disney like scavenger hunt, something like that. You could think early with your friends or whatever. And both reading and Disney, so that'd be 2 in 1.
And you can like scavenger that. They can do like a short events. Yeah.
I really like. Cool. Any other ideas? I think he does that actually, like kids.
Get some cash. Probably if there was a movie going to like rent out a theater for them if they wanted to.
What colors would we be using? So. String.
Pink and purple is classic Disney colors. Yes. We don't know that, but she likes Disney films. Well, maybe she is. She likes basketball. Any baby blue.
Those are things.
Yeah. I mean, she's only 5. How much can she really read?
True.
We'll get doctors.
Yeah.
For this full novel.
Really.
One of them.
We could have a Minnie Mouse shoot the hoop while she reads the book.
Book shaped cake. That's what we're
Station.
talking
That's not a whole lot to discuss now.
No.
If we're actually, we got the camera. Basketball. Other things.
I like it. Can have like princesses kind of go, hey, help this.
True.
And they go do stuff like a books and find the next school, go play basketball and then go around and do stuff.
I like the part of Scott where you like the presidents to the cake.
Yeah,
I like that. The giant. Puzzle.
Yeah, maybe that's what we can find.
Yeah, exactly. And then the cake party, or by that, like somewhere the cake is blue and then keep going.
Sounds like a really fun birthday party. I
Yeah.
want to be there.
Great.
Yeah. This is all going down on the grand floor.
Be intense. Yeah. There's so much to do here.
Good thing it's you play.
You can incorporate a lot of activities within that. It's kind of.
Exactly. All 3 categories. Yeah.
Yeah. You
But they're also private, so it's not like they're gonna be doing a whole lot of. in-depth
do
thinking.
it.
What?
I feel like escape room type stuff.
Good luck.
Just simple dots.
Travel around the whole town. You gotta hitchhike actually to your next location. In the snow.
You go to Morgan, right? Morgan Lake.
Yeah. The road's closed, you have to hike up there, ski back down.
Yeah.
So-
Anyway, the Zoom call would be us.
One way to think about this, right, would be to think about the sequence of events too. So if somebody came to this party, right? What is the order of things that they would experience? Maybe they come in and get a book as a party favor, or like that type of thing. So you might want to start thinking about like what that picture or story would look like.
Okay, so they arrive and be greeted by one of the actors in the character vibe party. It's in the mood. And then suppose take a little waiting area, and after something like that, the other one arrives, and then the scavenger hunt begins. And they'll be launching it.
We can say like, there's a Disney villain
No,
that hidden stuff around.
Yeah,
We
stole
can
the
find,
cake.
stole the
Stole the
cake as
cake.
well.
and like when the cake be the big kind of. They find a cake, eat the villain. That.
Yeah, actually, the villain is just a pinata.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
It could be the villain.
And then after the cake,
And then
you-
Just like one, yeah, we get them hyped up the whole like scavenger hunt so that you just give them all fat, just they go.
You got like the Disney princesses with like a black eye.
Just
Hit us.
give all the little girls back.
Messy melons. That would no. Yeah, I would hype them up on sugar and then maybe and let them loose. That sounds like a great idea.
Instead of just having playing basketball, we should do it sometimes.
Yeah, they got
These kids are living up on the heights.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you to share in just about a minute or so. Have somebody ready to share with the Zoom group.
Hey, no, where the parts go. Was it great?
All right, so I was hearing some great ideas from the group that is here face to face. So why don't we start with the Zoom group? What did you all come up with? What is your plan for Madeline's party?
So our theme, I guess, is gonna be all three of her favorite things combined. So the cake will be like Disney themed, and we're gonna have the party at a park. And we're planning on having some Disney character or Disney princess come and read a book to the kids. And for decorations, it'll basically be all of her favorite things, I guess. And we would like to have some games such as playing basketball. And to, I guess, how we're gonna host it is just, I guess just starting off with the games and then going into the reading, food, and cake.
Okay, great. So I really like the way that your group has a lot of different parts going on here. For instance, you mentioned the, the way that there is going to be your favorite things. There's going to be, the basketball at the park. I really like the way your group is able to like kind of stack on and integrate multiple ideas there. So thanks for sharing, Angela. How about the group here face to face? What did you all end up coming up with as your full party experience?
So pretty much our group consensus was like pretty much very scavenger hunt oriented. So we kind of combined in everything, the basketball, the reading, and scavenger hunt. So it's pretty much we're gonna have like actors dressed as Disney characters. We're gonna have a villain that the whole kids get hype up and have a award at the end of the scavenger hunt. It's gonna be so we have like basketball tasks in the scavenger hunt. We got some reading tasks in the scavenger hunt. We're working a lot with the actors of the Disney characters to get the full experience. And then at the end, like, you get to, like, kill the villain and eat the cake,
Yeah.
which is like the reward.
And
And
did
it's
I,
like-
did I hear the villain is like a pinata?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
That
idea.
was an idea thrown out there, to have the kids, get true revenge,
Yeah.
get the, yeah, show what's up.
It's like red.
What I really like about this, right, is we think back to when we were young kids and the things that we enjoyed, like, hey, scavenger hunt, hey, a pinata, there's a villain or there's a prize, right? And it's really cool to see you all pull together ideas of what like a 5-year-old would enjoy doing. So I really like the way you all put together these ideas, thinking through, things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on your own. So what I want you to do now in the remaining few minutes is using this activity, right? And some of the ideas that you came up with. I'd like you to independently write or type this for minutes today. Think about what went well as far as the brainstorming process, things that you were able to learn or gain from brainstorming. Considering the factors that are not as effective or weakened in brainstorming, how they impacted your group, if at all. And then lastly, how you feel about the way that your group arrived at a decision on how to do this party. So go ahead and wrap up the current sentence or thought that you're working on. It's okay if you don't feel like you've totally addressed these questions. Just way to again think about and brainstorm what we've gone over so far. Today we talked a little bit about brainstorming and the ways that members of a group can work together. The idea that as part of a group, you're able to pull together new thoughts and be open to the possibilities that brainstorming can give. And also the idea that human bias, error, and so on can impact our ability to brainstorm and to come up with ideas successfully as a group too. So again, it was a lot of fun to hear your stories about this birthday party and the ways that brainstorming helped you to get to that ending point. So for next class, On Friday, we'll be talking about how to facilitate and create a effective place for group members to work and to brainstorm together. So go ahead and email or pass forward your calls for today. And have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you again on Friday.
Oh, yeah, it was.